Insider Nation, what's going on? I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and there is a lot of smoke, I don't know if you can see it below me, around Russell Wilson rejoining Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. Coming up here on today's show, we are going to get into the latest rumors. The Raiders, they hired Pete Carroll to be their head coach, and I am somebody that when things happen quickly in the NFL, when rumors happen quickly, you need to be paying attention, and the rumors right now already linking Wilson to the Raiders with Pete Carroll coming from a lot of credible sources, and we're going to tell you who all those sources are here, and then at the end of the show, if the Raiders don't want to bring in a guy like Russ, we'll also look at some other potential options, trades, free agency coming up here on the Raiders Report. I promise you this, when Raiders news happens, we're going to cover it. Today's my off day, today's Chugs' off day, but the Raiders content game, it never slows down. Make sure you got the subscribe button clicked. Make sure you got that notification bell clicked as well. Click all. That way you get all the updates. When the Raiders do something, you will get a video from me. If I don't make a video, it means the Raiders haven't done it. If you want to stay up to date and know more about the Raiders than any of your buddies, anybody else out there, make sure you subscribe to the Raiders Report. So let's talk here a little bit about Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, because there is a lot of speculation, and according to Jeff Howe, who does have a lot of connections in NFL circles, the moment that the Raiders hired Pete Carroll this morning, the very first name that got thrown out there, and it was already reported of, hey, I'm hearing some circulation right now that Russell Wilson could potentially join Pete Carroll. And this almost makes me wonder if the Raiders do have a potential plan, right? If the Raiders have a plan and they're going out and getting Russ, like if you want to be able to bring in a good bridge quarterback, Wilson could be somebody. Won a Super Bowl with Carroll back in 2013. He's got a lot of history. Could potentially come in on a cheap deal. I mean, he played at a $1.2 million deal for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was reported that Wilson wanted to be a Raider last season. So you knew Wilson wanted to be a Raider last season. Now you go out and you hire Pete Carroll, a team that needs a quarterback situation. I called Pete Carroll a risky hire because I said you need to get a lot of other interviews and other coaches right. You got to find the guy that takes over for Pete in a few years. You got to find the right OCDC. You got to be able to find a quarterback with the number 6 pick. I'll tell you this right now. I said Deion Sanders might have been a safe hire because it's a guaranteed quarterback. What if Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have already been on the phone and saying, hey, I'm going to come to Las Vegas if you're there? If you can guarantee a quarterback, that helps you plan so much better going forward. It helps you plan what you're going to do in free agency. Helps you plan what you're going to be able to do in the draft. Helps be able to paint that picture of what type of OCDC stability that you're going to be able to bring in. Because, yes, Russell Wilson is a free agent. And there are other free agent options out there. And I know, Wilson's a corny dude. I'm not afraid to say it. I think Wilson's one of the corniest dudes out there. But for a Raiders organization that wants long-term stability, I think if you want a young QB to work underneath Wilson, because what I don't want is the Raiders to just say, all right, we're going to go out and get Wilson. I would like for the Silver and Black to have a long-term plan of a quarterback that can learn underneath Russ, because here's the real talk. If we draft a quarterback, you want that quarterback to work with somebody like Wilson, because whether you like him or not, he is very well regarded as putting that time, putting in that effort, and doing everything possible to succeed off the field. That type of mentality aligns with Tom Brady, and that type of mentality is going to help out our next future quarterback, whoever that is. So here's my question to the nation out there. Do you want the Raiders to sign Russell Wilson? Give me a yes, give me a no. My answer coming up after this YouTube ad break. The only way I want the Raiders to sign Russell Wilson is if you get him on a cheaper deal. Like, if you told me Wilson's willing to sign a deal very similar to the deal that we signed Gardner Minshew to last year, maybe a 2-year, $25 million deal, and he's a quarterback that has had a lot of success in this league, but then also you go out and you still try to draft a guy to learn underneath Russ, my answer to that is going to be yes. And I'll say this. I think for anybody out there that wants the Raiders to get a quarterback that helps you win right away, I know Wilson fell off a little bit as that year went on, but here's the other part about the Steelers organization. It is a organization that does get a lot of credit, but when you look at the fall apart that they've had over the past few seasons at the end of the year, it deserves to be noticed. Plus, his top receiver, George Pickens, kind of Devontae Adams him and has turned into a big-time diva. Russell Wilson with Brock Bowers, Jakobi Meyers, this offensive line with 12 draft picks and $92.5 million in salary cap, the second most in the NFL, I do think could be a potential winning roster. Also, Russ and Pete, went to 2 Super Bowls, and they won 1. The one they lost was the slant, and Tom Brady got an extra dub. But I also think this, if there's been a team that's probably struck fear into the eyes of Tom Brady, Chuck's just said it. Look at that record. That record is unbelievable. 104, 53-1 with 8 division titles. You need quarterbacks. You need a QB. In all honesty, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, when they walk into a room and they see Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, Bo Nix and Sean Payton, Russ and Pete aren't going to be intimidated by those guys. And you need a head coach and you need a quarterback that's going to be able to bring that confidence and be able to bring that type of swagger. You need to have those things. So am I excited about the Russell Wilson rumors? I am excited about it because to me it tells me that we clearly have a plan in place. And when you consider the fact of the magic that John Spytek was able to do, honestly, bringing Tom Brady for one down to Tampa Bay, won a Super Bowl down there, and then the magic that they're creating right now with Baker Mayfield, I'm sorry, but I think that we could potentially see the best version of Russell Wilson that we've seen in a very, very long time, simply due to Tom Brady, due to John Spytek, and due to Pete Carroll. Russell wants to be a Raider, and that needs to be something that I think we give him some credit on. Coming up next here on the show, though, let's talk about some other quarterbacks to at least keep an eye out for, because now that we have a head coach, the rumors circulating around the quarterback position are only going to grow. Now that we have a GM, they are only going to grow, and I will keep you up to date the best way possible. I will get into some of those names here in just a moment, but PrizePicks, they are America's #1 daily fantasy sports app out there, and I don't know if I've done as much winning as what Russ and Pete have done on PrizePicks, but I hope that I can because I'm trying to put some extra money in my pocket. And the big game, it's right around the corner, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with PrizePicks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. PrizePicks also gives away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 yard to win. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. So what am I talking about when I say that? If you want to put in a lineup for this weekend, Jaden Daniels, he needs to throw for 1 passing yard. If you get another projection right, now you can't pick somebody. If you're going to go with Jaden, you got to pick somebody from another team. So maybe it's the Eagles, the Bills, the Chiefs. I recommend just picking somebody in that Eagles-Commanders game. That way you can see if you win right away. You pick more, you pick less. It's really that simple. So really, you just got to get one of those correct, and you can turn money. And also, one of the things I love about PrizePicks is you can withdraw your money quick. If you win, you can actually get your money as quick as 15 minutes. So go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Make sure that you use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Sign up today and get $50 into when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, so since we're talking about Russell Wilson, I think I would be a bad host of the Raiders Report if I didn't at least get into some other candidates that you could potentially look at, and just in terms of who people could sign, right? And the names that you're going to see on screen are not the only names that you could look at. They're just certain names that, our chat sports team said, hey, these could be guys to consider. One of the names that you could look at is somebody like maybe a Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston obviously has ties with Tampa Bay, and a lot of those John Spytek. I'll admit, Winston's not the option I would go, though the pregame speeches that Winston would give, I'd be eating a lot of W's. Justin Fields, he's got some ties to the Pittsburgh Steelers in that offense. He's got a lot of ties to Champ Kelly, our Raiders assistant general manager, and I'm not going to lie, after seeing how bad Luke Getsy was, I would be curious to see what Justin Fields could look like in an offense, and maybe you just bring Fields and Wilson both over. I kind of kid when I say that. Sam Darnold has been a name linked to the Raiders. In an article released by ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, Fowler said that he thought that Sam Darnold was the most likely candidate to go to the Raiders. And I know what you want to say about Darnold. He struggled those last 2 games. But again, when you look at the success John Spytek just had with somebody like a Baker Mayfield, suddenly the Sam Darnold option doesn't look as bad. I don't want to pay any of those quarterbacks a lot of money. Sam Darnold, do you want to sign a deal 3 years, $100 million? That's probably what it would cost. You want to sign a Justin Fields? I think that one's a 1 year 10. And then, Jameis Winston's probably 1 year, $5 million. The Russell Wilson deal, I could see being a 3-year deal worth somewhere around 90 to 100 million as well, tying him to Pete Carroll. That would be my projection. Some other options that you could potentially trade for, which I will say this, the one name on here I think ends up getting released. That name is Kirk Cousins. But if you wanted to make a deal right now, I mean, could you go out and could you trade for Geno Smith, right? Somebody who was able to resurrect his career with Pete Carroll, with Shane Waldron, with a lot of those people in Seattle. I don't want to trade for Aaron Rodgers. I'm good on that. Matthew Stafford. That one would be a little bit more far-fetched to me. He's got zero guaranteed in 2026, and the Rams would have to eat somewhere around like $40 million if the Raiders were to trade for Stafford. My message here is this, though. For the Raiders to already have leaks out, and there's a lot of leaks, right? Like the fact that Ian Rappaport, Jeff Howe, Adam Schefter are already talking about Russell Wilson going to Pete, I don't think it's because they're just guessing. I think that there's already conversations that are being had. So it's important to remember this. Carroll drafted Russ in the 3rd round and started him as a rookie over Matt Flynn. Like, the Seahawks gave Matt Flynn a fat contract, and they were like, yo, Russ is killing it right now in the preseason. He was amazing all offseason as well. Like, that's the option we're going to go with. Pete Carroll is going to put the best player out there. Pete Carroll is going to put the guy on the field that gives him the best chance to win, and they're going to try to win right away. So when you find a head coach that has had success being able to find quarterbacks, a little bit later in the draft, that's something that we got to like to see. And then you got John Spytek, who's been able to work with veteran quarterbacks. That's something that you got to love to see. And then you got somebody who's won a Super Bowl with the head coach that you just hired. That's something that you got to love to see. If it was up to me, there would be 3 quarterbacks that I would be very high on for the Raiders to draft and pair them behind somebody like Russell Wilson. These are my top 3 quarterbacks. Shedeur, Cam Ward. Cam Ward is my number 1 flipping guy. If we get Cam Ward, I would do backflips on this show, and I can't even do a backflip. Jalen Milroe would be somebody that I think could learn under somebody like a Russell Wilson. I think Dylan Gabriel could be an option to learn underneath Russell Wilson. I'm not as high on Jackson Dart as some other people are out there in NFL circles, but could be at least a name to keep in mind. So, could Pete Carroll take a chance on a 2nd or 3rd round quarterback? Like, it could potentially happen. The quarterbacks that we just talked about, I think that Jalen probably goes in the 2nd or 3rd round. Like, let's be honest. Like, he's going to go in the 2nd. The quarterbacks that are going to go in round 1 are going to be Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, but could Dylan Gabriel be an interesting option? And there's going to be a lot of people that say he's too small. Russell Wilson was too small. Russell Wilson didn't have the arm strength. Russell Wilson didn't have this, didn't have that. But Russell Wilson was the gamer. And I'll admit, I don't love Dylan Gabriel the way that I liked Russell Wilson coming out. But at the same time, Gabriel's, what he's done, I think is more impressive in college than what Russell Wilson ever did. That's a fact. And I'm not going to blame Pete. If Pete looks at Dylan Gabriel and goes, he reminds me of a lefty Wilson, I'm going to trust Pete. It's the same way where, last offseason I said, I think Sean Payton's going to look at Bo Nix and go, Bo Nix reminds me of Sean Payton, and I'm going to go out and try to go get a Bo Nix. Like, I'm not going to fault for somebody for doing something that's worked for them in the past. Jalen Milroe, again, this is somebody where his draft stock fell a little bit, but I also think that Jalen deserves just a little bit of credit or just a little bit of he lost Nick Saban, right? Like, think about how many coaches have been more important to a program. He's the greatest head coach of all time. So am I surprised that Jalen Milroe took a step back? Am I surprised that the entire University of Alabama football program took a step back after losing Nick Saban? No. And I don't think that y'all should be. I think when you look at Jalen Milroe, you're hoping that you draft a Milroe that was with Saban in Alabama, not this past year, but the year prior to that. And I think if you let Milroe learn for a year or two, there's not many athletes in the NFL that are built like Jalen Milroe. And, you could pair Jalen. Maybe you pair him with somebody like, I don't know, an Ashton Genty, and you run a very interesting offense, kind of the way that the Seahawks did with a more mobile quarterback. Milroe ain't the passer of what Wilson was, but hey, it's a name to keep in mind. So here's what I want y'all to do. Go down to the comments section, and I want you to predict who will start week 1 for the Raiders next season at the quarterback position. If I was a betting man, and I am, I'm going to say the number 1 option to be the Raiders starting quarterback is Russell Wilson. I think a lot of people might say Aiden O'Connell. If I'm being honest with you, I think Aiden O'Connell could be on his way out, and I only say that not because I don't love Aiden. He's got a lot of starting experience, $1.2 million, but Aiden's good enough where he shouldn't be a third-string quarterback. And when you see a team like the New England Patriots hire a guy like Josh McDaniels, I could see a team like that offering us a 6th-round pick, going out and getting somebody like Aiden O'Connell. So to me, it's not going to be Aiden. Reminder, y'all, if you haven't already, give me a follow on IG and on Twitter at Mitchell Renz 365. I think the hire of Pete Carroll proves that this team is trying to win right now, and they're trying to get stability in the next 3 years, and the way he thinks aligns with a lot of the things that John Spytek does. I still think it's risky because you got to be able to go out and find the right OC, the right DC, the right head coach. But the fact that these rumors are already circulating around Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, if the Raiders go out and sign Russ, you already know we're balling here on the Raiders Report.